What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue here with my 2024 college football schedule preview and projected record series. The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets are up next, and before we preview their schedule for 2024 and give them an early projected record based on how tough their schedule is, let's take a look back at what Georgia Tech did in 2023. Here are my projections and predictions last year for Georgia Tech. My projection had them at 4-8, and then my prediction for this team was 6-6. So I did have, at least Georgia Tech go into a bowl game, according to my prediction there for 2023. My projection was 4-8 for them just because of how tough the schedule was, but this team ended up going to a bowl game last year. They went 6-6 in the regular season, 7-6 overall, if you count their bowl game victory at the end of the year. So Georgia Tech coming off a bit of a surprise season. But again, I did predict this team to make it to a bowl game, and I was right on the money with their prediction from last year. Here was the schedule last season in 2023, and you look at this non-conference schedule. They had to play South Carolina State and Bowling Green, a couple of cupcake games there, but they ended up losing to Bowling Green, which that definitely was a very unacceptable loss there for Georgia Tech. But then they played Ole Miss on the road here, and then Georgia out of the SEC, so they had a very tough non-conference schedule, but they ended up losing both of those games in the non-conference out of the SEC. Then you look at the losses coming in the ACC last year. They lost to Louisville in that season opener in Atlanta. Then they lost to Boston College here at home. And then they lost to Clemson on the road here on November 11th. So they did have a very tough schedule last year, but this team was still able to go to a bowl game last year with this tough schedule in 2023. Let's now look ahead to 2024. Here is the schedule for the upcoming season for Georgia Tech. And before we go game by game, let's take a look at who they will play in the non-conference this upcoming season. So this is their non-conference schedule. They will play Georgia State and VMI, a couple of cupcake games there. Georgia State is not a bad Sun Belt team, but those are a couple of cupcake games there for Georgia Tech. And then they played Notre Dame and Georgia here on the road. So they do have a tough non-conference schedule once again. When you got Notre Dame and Georgia, two teams that are potentially like top 10 teams, and also potentially like top 5 teams, and also playoff contenders. Yes, that's a very tough non-conference schedule. You at least get the Fighting Irish here at home, but you have to go ahead and play Georgia here on the road in Athens. And it's very tough to play Georgia every single year, on the schedule, because that is their rival game that they play in rivalry weekend each and every single year. And they do have to go on the road and play them here in Athens. So that would be a very tough game there on the road in the non-conference. So that's a non-conference schedule here for Georgia Tech in 2024. Let's go back to the schedule now here and go game by game now for Georgia Tech. They will open up their season with Florida State here. So they will open up ACC play here with Florida State on a neutral site venue in week number 0 on August 24th. They will play this game in Dublin, Ireland. So I'm very interested to see what happens in that game, in the Dublin, Ireland game. They will play that game in week number 0, and then they play Georgia State here on August 31st. Then after that, they go on the road to play Syracuse here on September the 7th. Then they play their second non-conference game here against VMI here on September the 14th. And then they go on the road to play Louisville here on September the 21st. Then they get their first bye week here in the last weekend of the month of September. Then they come out of the bye week. They'll get to the month of October. They'll play Duke here at home on October the 5th. Then it's on the road here at North Carolina on October the 12th. And then they come back here at home to play Notre Dame, their other non-conference game here on October the 19th. And then they go on the road to play Virginia Tech here on October 26th. Then they get their second bye week here in the first weekend of the month of November. They come out of the bye week at a pretty good time. They'll play Miami here at home on November the 9th. Then they get their third bye week, I should say. So they get 3 bye weeks on this schedule. And they will play NC State here on a Thursday on November the 21st. That's a weeknight game there. They do get that game at home. And then they close things out with Georgia here on the road on November the 30th. So that's a schedule for Georgia Tech in 2024. Another tough schedule for Georgia Tech, but it's no surprise. They do get a tough schedule every single year when they play in the ACC, and also they do play a tough non-conference schedule each and every single year as well. And again, this is a very tough schedule for Georgia Tech. But let's get to the projection here for Georgia Tech for 2024. This is not going to be my official prediction. This is simply going to be my projection here based on how tough this schedule is. And this is the scale I use here for my projections. If it's a 1% game in the red, That percentage is counted as an automatic loss there in the red at 1%, and then 20% games here in the orange are going to be games where Georgia Tech will be about a couple touchdowns of underdogs. 40% games in the yellow are going to be games where they'll be about a heavy underdog game by about a touchdown there, and then 50-50 games will of course stay in the white. Games I think can go either way, and then 60% games here in the purple. These are games where Georgia Tech will be favored by at least a touchdown, and then 80% games here in the blue, they'll be favored by a couple touchdowns and also by double digits. And then the 99% games here in the green, they're pretty much counted as the automatic wins here. So we'll start with those automatic wins here and also those easy wins here for Georgia Tech on this schedule for this upcoming season. I think you got a couple of easy wins on here for the Yellow Jackets, Georgia State and VMI. Georgia State I think will be a little bit tough because that's not a bad Sun Belt team in Georgia State. They could be a little bit of a challenge there, but still, Georgia Tech should be favored in this game, and they should go out there and take care of business in this game as well. And then VMI, pretty much the only easiest non-conference game here on their schedule that I do see Georgia Tech winning by at least more than 3 touchdowns. And again, we count these 2 green games as automatic wins. They're not guaranteed wins, but they're counted as automatic wins here when we do these projections here for each and every single team. So those are the 2 games where I think Georgia Tech will take care of business in. And again, we count these green games as automatic wins. And then you look at the rest of the schedule. There's not really any other games on here, especially in the conference, that I can favor Georgia Tech in, especially in the blue and purple. So let's skip over to the games now in the 1%, 20% in yellow here in the 40% category. I do have one red game on here that's counted as an automatic loss, and that red game is on the road here at Georgia on November the 30th. I don't really see Georgia Tech going on the road and defeating Georgia. It would really shock me if they were able to pull off an upset here. Georgia obviously is way too talented. They're going to have a lot of production coming back this year, and mostly their defense is coming back as well. So Georgia Tech might have a hard time moving against this offense, or actually I should say the defense of Georgia, like they usually do every year. I know the game was pretty close last year, but I don't really expect it to be very competitive this year just because it's on the road, and that's the reason why this game is in the red, just because it's on the road. And again, Georgia Tech is absolutely not on the level, and they're not really talented like Georgia is, so this is definitely an automatic loss here for Georgia Tech. I don't have any orange games on here for Georgia Tech, but I do have some yellow games here for Georgia Tech that are very winnable, and these are pretty much like upset alert type games, but they'll be counted as a heavy underdog game by about a touchdown. And I got 4 games on here in the yellow: Florida State, Louisville, Notre Dame, and NC State. I think all these games can almost go either way, but I think there'll be a slight underdog in all 4 of these games. Florida State, that's a neutral site venue game, and that's the reason why this game ended up being in the yellow. If it was at Florida State, I probably would put that one in the orange, but if it was a home game as well for Georgia Tech, I would still probably keep it in the yellow, but Florida State is definitely a more talented team than Georgia Tech is. Louisville here on the road, just because that one's on the road, that's the reason why I put this one as a heavy underdog type game. And then Notre Dame here at home. Notre Dame is a much more talented team than Georgia Tech is, but again, they do get this game at home, and I think that's definitely an upset alert type game to keep an eye on. And then NC State here, that's another game that I probably could go either way, but I think Georgia Tech is slightly a little bit under than NC State here in the talent-wise. So I'm going to go with North Carolina State as the favorite here. Plus, it's a weeknight game. Georgia Tech gets a bye week before playing this game, and they do have a chance probably to upset NC State here if this game was, actually if NC State was ranked in the top 25. So all 4 of these games are in the yellow for me. They can definitely win some of these games in the yellow. They're definitely very winnable, and they're not really losses here for Georgia Tech. And then the rest of the 5 games on here: Syracuse, Duke, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, and Miami. These are all games that I think can go either way here for Georgia Tech. Syracuse, I don't know how good they're going to be. They had a really tough season last year. You look at Duke, obviously going to have a first-year head coach this year. North Carolina, I know that's a game that's on the road. Georgia Tech should be a little bit of an underdog there, but they did defeat North Carolina last year. That's the reason why this game is in the white. Virginia Tech has a lot of production coming back this year. This is the team that has the most production coming back in the country, so that's definitely a tough road game there. And then you got Miami here, a team that beat Georgia Tech, a team that, Georgia Tech beat last year on a really, stupid play that Miami had in the final seconds of the game. And then Georgia Tech obviously got the Hail Mary pass. So this is definitely a 50-50 game, and it's also an upset alert type game as well. So again, all 5 of these games can go either way here for Georgia Tech, and they're definitely very winnable. So let's get to the projected record here for Georgia Tech based on how tough the schedule is. And again, not my official prediction. This is simply a projection based on how tough the schedule is. So we count a couple of those green games as automatic wins. You count that one red game there against Georgia as a loss, and then you count or average out all these yellow games here at 40%. Then you average out the 50-50 games here at 50%, and the overall projected record that you get for Georgia Tech comes out to be 4-8 here for 2024. So the same projection for me as last year. And again, Georgia Tech is a team that did surprise us last year. I do expect them to have a chance to make it to a bowl game, but again, based on how tough this schedule is, and that's the reason why the projection came out to be 4-8 here for Georgia Tech. I definitely could see this team going 6-6, maybe 5-7. 5-7 as of right now, probably the best case scenario. Worst case, probably like 2-10 or 3-9. It would definitely really shock me if this team were to go to a bowl game and probably win maybe 7 games perhaps in 2024. But I think best case they can probably win 6 or 7 games. And then you look at the 5 games, I think they have a chance to probably win 5 games as well. But if they only win 1 game on this schedule, that's definitely a very big disappointment, especially for a team that went to a bowl game last year. So, again, my projection for Georgia Tech here for 2024, based on how tough this schedule is 4-8 here for 2024. So give me your thoughts on this Georgia Tech team down in the comments below. What do you think their projected record is for 2024? And stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports Channel.